The Capital Budget Committee meeting for Thursday, January 12th. We have public hearings on 3 bills. The capital budget is presented by the governor, the obligation bonds to fund that budget, and then also reducing homelessness capital expenditure program and bond program. And I just want to go over some of the sort of the mechanics here, as folks have they've heard these comments, I think, if they've been in other meetings. But we're on TVW, and so it's recorded and streamed live. And so some meeting participants are in the room, some may be joining remotely by Zoom. And regardless of how you participate, you must be recognized by the chair before speaking. And participants in the room must use their microphones when speaking so that it will broadcast into Zoom for any remote participants. Also, the cameras in the room will switch to whoever is actively speaking. If there's noise coming from your microphone, you will display as an active speaker in the video stream. So for this reason, you should only turn on your microphone when the chair calls on you to speak. Please turn off your microphone again once you have finished speaking. And we have, a very hard finish, as you know, with these committees this session, because tech needs a chance to set up for this hybrid for the subsequent committee. So we, at this point, have, I think, about 120 people that have wanted to sign up and testify on these 3 bills, and we will be limiting the testimony to 1 minute. And a fairly hard stop, and really would appreciate if you look. Some folks, I think, have signed up both remotely and in person, and there is some maybe redundancy on having signed up a couple of times. So if you could help us with that and manage that, I think we will hopefully get to as many, but we'll get to as many people as possible, and hopefully the full list. But if we don't get to you, you can always submit your testimony to staff and to committee members, probably best to staff, and then they will disseminate that to all the committee members. I think that kind of covers the ground rules for this. And we're going to start out with just a brief description from staff, and then we'll turn it over to David Schumacher from the Department of Office and Financial Management. So, Kelsey?
Yeah. Hi, Kelsey Carl Robinson, staff to the committee. In the interest of time, I'll just provide a high-level overview of the 3 bills before you. 1147 is the governor's proposed capital budget, with which David Schumacher will give an overview of, and you'll have more detail at that time. 1148 is the bond authorization associated with that proposal. It authorizes $3.98 billion in general obligation bonds for capital projects, and there's a part 2 related to $895 million for the new forensic hospital at Western State, for a total of $4.88 billion in bond authorization. 1149 is the $4 billion bond authorization related to housing projects, and it is it will send that bond authorization to the voters, which means it's would be outside of the debt limit. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm not cultivating questions, no. I'm not totally shutting down. Thank you, Kelsey. Welcome, David Schumacher. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. David Schumacher, OFM Director. I know you have a lot of people here, so I will go through the governor's capital budget and the referendum idea relatively quickly. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. But if there's anything that doesn't get answered by anybody, any individual today, please let me know. Either I or my staff will come by and walk through any level of detail that we don't manage to get to today. So I hope that that works for everybody. We will. All I can see is me.
1 second.
So as we get,
I'll use a little more background information. So what we're going to try to do is, while we're waiting for this presentation, as we call folks up, we're going to try to alternate between folks that are in the room and folks that are remotely testifying, and probably do that in panels of 3 or so that we, can tee folks up in both in person and remotely. So that's kind of the way we're going to proceed. The vice chair will call people accordingly.
so it looks like we're making progress here. So I'll just get started, and hopefully the presentation will catch up. The governor's capital budget this year has a couple differences in what you might think of as conventional in terms of the conventional GO bond part of the capital budget. One of the things that we wrestled with, and this committee will wrestle with, is the forensic hospital at Western State. That is a big item that, to be honest, doesn't fit into the conventional year-to-year capital budget. So the questions that we wrestled with were around, should we delay it? Should we chop it into pieces? Should we cut other things in the underlying budget to make room for it? Should we spend a little more in this budget, knowing that, future budgets, may have to make up for that? What is the balance of spending now and spending in the future? Knowing that the real priority, and I think the priority of the entire legislature, is that this forensic hospital is something that really has to go forward. And it's expensive. I mean, I'll admit that right up. But again, there are a number of ways of mitigating that impact. I'll show you the way we did it, but I'm sure the committee will discuss it as you go. We have on this screen our priorities and some of our challenges, it looks like. But again, and the priorities in the capital budget are the priorities that are in the governor's operating budget. At the top of the list, housing and homelessness, behavioral health, climate. Again, the challenges, the big challenge, like I said, is this hospital. Other than that, it would be a relatively normal capital budget. That doesn't mean easy, but a relatively normal situation. So I just wanted to point out kind of the difference that we find here. We go to the next slide. So this is just the typical chart that you see for every capital budget. Again, I'll mention when we get to the referendum part of the conversation that there's a little more money here than usual because of the governor's the $4 billion referendum proposal that I'll get to in a minute. But it obviously allows more spending, a little more spending this biennium and more spending in the next few biennium than would normally be available. We can go one more and we can get to the homelessness package. I think this chart that my staff produced really tells the story. If you look back over the years, we've had a relatively stable and what seemed at the time significant amount of investment in housing in this state. Obviously, the problem has gotten much worse in recent years. In the last budget, we were able to spend much more than usual, in large part because we had extra federal money and there was money in the operating budget that was moved to capital. So there was kind of a one-time ability to spend more than was typical. What the governor chose to do here is not go back to the old level of year-to-year spending, down in the $200 million a year. But the way to do that would be to use operating money again, ongoing. The operating budget is relatively tight now that the federal money, the one-time federal money, has gone away. To do it within the capital budget, there's just certainly not any ability for the capital budget to do something of this scale. So the question was, do we do a modest little continuation of what we did in housing and homeless, or do we go big? So the governor, and I'm sure some of you have heard him talk about this, wants to go much bigger and bolder on housing than we've ever done before. So that is why we're proposing this $4 billion referendum. It goes to the voters. The reason it goes to the voters, well, first it goes to the legislature, not to, but if the legislature approves it and sends it to the voters, this would mean that it doesn't count within the debt limit. Now, it certainly means that we have to pay the debt service and it becomes an obligation just like anything else, but it wouldn't decimate all future capital budgets. So that's why we chose that path. To go this big required something different than typical. And what we did here was the decision to go outside the conventional process. And to do that, we need the vote of the people for it not to count against the debt limit. I think the governor feels that this would pass easily, that the people realize that we need to do something bigger and sooner and bolder than we've done in previous budgets, and this is our proposal. Continuing on without the pictures, I know the next we talk about, again, the forensic hospital. We talk here in the slides that you'll be able to see about $1 billion of behavioral health spending. Over $900 million of that is the hospital. So that is the big driver here. And whether we spend $900 million now, which is our preference, or $500 million this biennium and $400 million next, and hope that inflation doesn't perk up in between, the obligation of the state for the hospital is the same. So the question is, what are the other things that we mitigate around it, right? There's only so much we can do. There's a lot of good things in the capital budget. But this is certainly a big priority, and I think a big priority of everybody. It's why it passed in previous budgets. We go on. So over 366 of climate money you'll see with the Climate Commitment Act. There is money in all three budgets, transportation, capital, and operating. The Climate Commitment Act bill prescribed, sometimes precisely, sometimes loosely, what kinds of things that money ought to be spent on. So the governor obviously spent the money within that framework, but there is flexibility for the legislature about exactly how they want to fulfill the items that were in that legislation. We can go on. That also includes a significant investment, as you see, in salmon recoveries, habitat recovery, riparian hatcheries, an ongoing commitment to salmon. Next, please. And then you see the basic infrastructure things that the capital budget typically wrestles with, whether that's the Public Works Board or water, Chehalis Basin, Columbia River. These things are, as you know, members of the committee, these are things that are almost always in the capital budget, and we continue funding those at levels that you would expect. Next. Schools, of course. School construction is becoming a larger and larger part of the capital budget. Not to be the old guy in the room, but was a capital budget staffer in the legislature 20-some years ago, and this number was a tiny percentage of what the capital budget bonds went for, and now, since K-12 is such a priority, it is squeezing everything else within the capital budget, and it's continued to do so for the 20 years. So everything else in the capital budget has kind of had to make do to accommodate the commitment to K-12. One thing we were able to do, and this is one of those pieces that the tension about how to fit the forensic hospital into the budget was, we really liked, well, of course we really liked our budget. We really liked the fact that the four-year schools, we were able to fund the four-year schools. Number one, each one of them has a significant building. We were able to finance a number of the community technical college lists. So it's a pretty robust higher ed list, one that we couldn't really do if we had to squeeze the entire hospital like into a conventional box. So when I talk about what are the gives and takes, this is certainly one of those, not to threaten my good friends in higher ed, but you know, it's one of the things that we decided we didn't want to cut those things and propose a little bit more non-conventional structure. And that is a pretty brief run through. I'm open to questions, and like I said, my staff and I are open to questions, you know, this week, next month. If things come up, please ask, and obviously your staff can answer, you know, most of the questions. We work very closely with them.
Yeah, thank you, David. We just a couple of questions. I have one on the, you know, the housing capital expenditure, the bond process, which is, you know, has to be passed by the legislature and referendum by the people. The funding mechanism for that, or what is your anticipation? Because it would be outside sort of our you know, the normal structure of our bond bill, and obviously it's all bonding capacity for the state, as you mentioned, with our you know, the full backing of the state. So it does have broad implications for that. If you just speak to that a little bit, what you're thinking about as far as that, and or what your thinking was, I guess.
Fair question, because it is not the conventional way we do things. So, like I said, the reason to go to the people is so that it doesn't count against the regular conventional debt limit. That in no way means that it is any less backed by the state of Washington than any other debt. So then the question is, well, how much is it? What are we obligating ourselves to? I would argue that we could either obligate ourselves to roughly $250 million of debt service a year, or obligate ourselves to $250 million of housing spending spread out over the next 25 years. We think that it's better to bond against it and get the money up front, but either way, you know, it's an ongoing obligation of the general fund. To put it in context, that's a little less than 0.5% of the general fund. So depending on how you think it, you know, $250 million is real money. Less than 0.5% is pretty small. In terms of our overall debt obligation, we are on a path right now to touch just a bit over the life of this bond issue, a little over 6% of the general fund for debt service, right? For all the conventional capital budgets that we have and will continue to pass. So this would put us, you know, in pick a year, from like 6.2% of the general fund that pays for debt service to like 6.7%, and that margin is the roughly 0.5% that I mentioned. And you know, I mean, it is non-conventional. I think that the governor would say that this is a time that we have a crisis here, and it's time to think outside the box and do something a little bit different. And this is a thing that is affordable, but there are trade-offs, and there'll be trade-offs for years to come.
Thank you. And Representative Steele also has a question on this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. David, a couple questions, if I might. One, I have some concerns around accountability. How do we, as the legislature, make sure that these dollars are getting where they need to go? What's the report back mechanism? And then secondarily, what's the measure of success for the governor? You know, what will a win be? Because we've invested almost $1 billion in the time that I've been here in housing and homelessness across Washington, and we're still not seeing that needle move very much. So what's a win look like for the governor in this?
Right, to get back, so I think what he would say is we have seen, especially in the last couple of years, as we've spent more than normal, that we have seen progress in getting people off the streets. I'm talking more about the homeless part of this, The whole proposal is homeless and housing, kind of the whole spectrum. In terms of the accountability, there are a number of things here in the bill. They would have to be appropriated, program by program, just like anything else in the budget. So I think very much concerns about accountability and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work has got to be part of this. I'm not sure that it's been the lack of accountability that's been the problem. I think in large part it's been a lack of funding to get these things done. So, but that doesn't mean, every program has been run perfectly and, I won't make that case. But I think it's time to go bigger than we've ever gone before. And I think that chart shows that this is just a fundamentally bigger proposal than what we've done in the past. And, we made good progress. We invested in this, but it's not enough to stem, the problem is getting bigger while we address it. So I think we have to do more.
Quick follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's just a quick follow-up. The bill refers in several locations to low-income housing, but what I find in my district that I represent is I'm missing that middle-income housing, and that's a huge problem for a lot of communities that I've traveled to around Washington State. Is there any opportunity to address that particular issue?
I think very much so, and I know that the governor also has a bill addressing exactly middle-income housing issues, because I think that we all realize that the homelessness and housing runs all the way from a mental health problem to middle-class families and getting, having houses for them to live in and everything in between. So I don't know that we're going to solve all the world's problems with one bill, but the bill and the appropriations in this budget definitely consider each of these parts of what I think most of us would think the problem is.
I'm going to take one more question, and then we'll move to public testimony. Representative Farver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Schumacher. I'm just wondering, and please let me know if this is not an appropriate question for you, but I'm trying to understand. So I understand the forensic hospital originally was estimated at around, I think, 650 million. What's changed? That's about 250 million in addition. Can you tell me a little bit, just briefly?
I think you're going to find this in almost every item that you deal with in this committee, that inflation is running rampant in the construction industry. It'll show up in community college buildings. It'll show up in higher ed. So I don't think there's anything in particular here. It's just that when you have such a big, you're talking about big numbers, so inflation on top of big numbers drives that. But I think unfortunately, we're going to wrestle with that across the budget.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for the work, obviously the budgets, and for your briefing on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go to public testimony. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll do 1-minute testimony, and we'll try to, the vice chair will call folks up, and we'll try to alternate between remote and in-person testimony. So Vice Chair Callan.
Thank you, Chair Theringer. I would like to start. We're going to, as the chair mentioned, we'll be rotating between remote and in person, and we'd like to start with remote. And I believe they're about to show up here. It's Vice President Fawn Sharp, the Quinault Indian Nation, Councilman Jeremy Takala, Yakima Nation, and Council Lady Esther Moses Hayapur from the Yakima Nation.
And while we're getting them into the room, I just want to mention we're taking testimony on all 3 bills as we were briefed. And if you want to, in your testimony, if you're interested in speak to one in particular, just highlight that in your testimony. But we are taking testimony on all 3 of the bills before us.
Vice President Sharp is here.
Vice President Sharp, go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Theringer, Representative Steele, and members of the committee. I am Fawn Sharp, Vice President of the Quinault Indian Nation. We would like to thank the governor for including $50 million of the Climate Commitment Act funding in this budget, and ask that you honor the commitment made in Senate Bill 5126 to use this funding first for tribal nations most severely affected by sea level rise and flooding. Due to the serious threats to our Tahoe and Queets villages and the need for relocation to higher ground, we ask that the Quinault Indian Nation be at the front of the line for this funding. We also would like to thank the governor for continuing funding for the Upper Quinault River Restoration Project and the legislature for your past investments. This restoration work is paying off. The fish runs increasing and flooding of private county roads are significantly reduced. We ask that you double that investment this biennium to include $4 million. Finally, we are seeking $7 million from the state to support the expansion of the Quinault Wellness Center in Aberdeen. The center opened its doors in October using $20 million of our own funding, and the facility is expected to reach capacity by this summer. We are shovel ready if the state is willing to help us expand. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Sharp. Councilman Jeremy Takala. We can't hear you.
Are they going to be able to hear me?
Can you guys hear me now?
There we go. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Can I turn it over to our Council Lady Esther Moses Hype here first, and I will be providing the last comments here real quick.
All right. Go ahead. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Esther Moses Hype here. I'm a member of the Yakima Nation Tribal Council and Chair of the Tribal Council Education Committee and the Yakima Nation Tribal School Board. We thank the governor for funding the small district modernization grant of OSPI's budget in the amount of $17 million. This amount includes the compact Yakima Nation Tribal Schools critical requests for current facility maintenance and future school designs. Both are necessary for the education of our children. The school building is 66 years old. It was originally built in 1957 as a church school. The average 8th to 12th grade enrollment between 2015 and 2021 was 148 students. The high was 169 students enrolled at one time, with dozens on the wait list. Despite a crumbling building and all of the remote challenges created by the COVID pandemic, the teachers, administration, and students are working to become the school of choice for students who want to excel and become leaders in our community. The governor proposed this funding because the tribal school needs it to be in the interim while we build a new school to fit their needs in the beginning stages of getting construction for this new facility. We thank you for your consideration of this funding and look forward to meeting with you to discuss school needs in more detail.
Thank you. And Councilman Takala.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Takala. I'm the chair of the Tribal Council Legislative Committee. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I want to thank those of you and the other members who have visited our Yakima Nation Tribal School and met with our council in the past years and our staff to understand the importance of the request. In 2021, Yakima Nation received an allocation from your budget to work with OSPI to complete a feasibility study for a modern facility that can meet student and staff capacity needs, operational needs, and building to meet the needs essential cultural curriculum. That feasibility report is the basis of pre-construction design requests here today. We're requesting funding for the design phase to get shovel-ready building plans, which is included in the governor's budget. The allocation also recognizes how much is needed on fire and electrical safety issues and ongoing maintenance that is required to keep the doors open in this nearly 70-year-old building, as Esther Moses mentioned. In terms of the current ongoing educational experience, until we get a new building, it is undesirable for the students to be harmed by significant facility limitations in the classrooms, food service, and in athletics. The Yakima Nation has already committed the land for the new school construction and has directed staff and technical resources to reduce or eliminate the cost of necessary site studies. Our nation has been working through federal channels at the Bureau of Indian Education and the Bureau of Indian Affairs to leverage this request with federal financial support as a part of its federal trust responsibility and education.
You could wrap up, please, Mr.
Just want to thank you for your consideration to all those has visited our school. Thank you, members and chair.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to call up for an in-person panel Erica Hollick, Danny Jo Bechtold, and Tyler Munch. And then we'd like to bring in from a remote, I would like to bring in John Worthington, Josephine Murray, or Tamayo Murray, excuse me, Anderson, let's see, Pastor Carrie Anderson.
think
Go
I'll
ahead.
go to save time. Erica Halleck on behalf of Start Early Washington, here to speak in support of the governor's proposal for a $45 million investment in the Department of Commerce's Early Learning Facilities Fund. The capital investments in this program provide support for all of our state's pre-K and subsidized childcare programs, which are essential to assisting our parents in getting to work and our kids in their educational attainment. We know that the need for resources is significant. The minor renovation grant program had 946 applications, and the Department of Commerce was only able to award 253. As an example, I visited Busy Bees in Toppenish this summer, and that program had secured funding to buy an awning, which allowed the kids to play outside in the blazing sun. So that is just one example of the work that's going on statewide. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you.
Chair Theringer and members of the committee, Tyler Munch here on behalf of the Superintendent of Public Instruction to testify in support of the governor's proposed capital budget. This budget will benefit countless small and rural school districts by funding OSPI's trust land revenue proposal, which establishes the Common School Construction Account as a dedicated funding source for the Small District Modernization Grant Program. This investment will will provide fully funded capital modernizations to small and rural school districts which consistently fail capital bonds and levies, providing essential relief to our small districts. The governor's budget also includes $40 million for the school seismic safety program, continuing the crucial work which was funded by this committee last session. We respectfully request the legislature follow the governor's lead and fund OSPI's trust land revenue proposal and school seismic safety program. Thank you, Governor Inslee, and thank you, members, for listening to my testimony. Happy to answer any questions.
Way to come in under time, Tyler. And Madam Vice Chair, we have folks coming in remotely at this point.
It looks like we still are trying to bring them over. So at this point, let me go ahead and call in-person panels, get them on deck. And that would be Krista Milhofer, Mike Raymond, and Carl Schroeder. We're in-person on deck. And do I need to list the names again for the remote? Remote was John Worthington, Josephine Tamayo Murray, and Pastor Carrie Anderson.
Carl, why don't you go ahead? You're there and ready to go.
Thank you, Chair Theringer, members of the committee. Carl Schrader with the Association of Washington Cities, here in support of the governor's capital budget and the bond bill. On the budget side, we support the request for $400 million in public works assistance. As you know, the public works assistance account is a critical priority for cities. It will help our housing efforts as well. Support the Housing Trust Fund and rapid acquisition investments outside of the bond approach. And I just wanted to let you know, I sent you all an email at about 1 o'clock with the need numbers that are generated by the work that you all did a couple of years ago, showing the need for 500,000 units at 0 to 50% of area median income in the next 20 years, spread all around the state. That's why we're supporting that bond bill and the opportunity for the voters to help support that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Josephine Tamayo Murray. Go ahead, Josephine.
Thank you, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, and members of the committee. Josephine Tamayo Murray with the Communities of Concern Commission and Catholic Community Services in support of House Bill 1147 and the governor's budget. The Communities of Concern Commission is a statewide coalition of 24 community-based organizations of color and poor rural areas. We thank the governor for including $1 million in the budget for project pre-development to assure feasibility and hope that we can count on your support of this needed funding. This past year, with your support, the Communities of Concern Commission had 7 capital projects, either fully funded, have a groundbreaking, in construction, rent up, open for services, and expand operations. The Commission really appreciates your confidence in us and our community-based organizations to build and preserve self-determined capital assets in our respective communities to reduce poverty. Thank you for your hard work and support.
Thank you. Pastor Anderson, go ahead, please.
Let me take myself off mute. Hello, committee members. I am Pastor Kerry Anderson of the First AME Church. Also, I am board chair of the Fame Equity Alliance of Washington, and I'm the new president of the Communities of Concern Commission, and I'm speaking in support of House Bill 1147. First of all, let me offer my deep gratitude and thanks to Governor Inslee for putting $1 million into the capital budget for us to continue our work to assist BIPOC organizations develop housing projects, facilities, and other needed services. I ask the committee's continued support as we move the needle forward in addressing the housing needs of the most vulnerable populations. Thank you, committee, for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the commission and the communities in which we serve and represent. And
Thank
I
you.
yield back 13 seconds.
Thank you. Mr. Worthington, go ahead.
Thank you, John Worthington, Squim. I'm in dispute with ecology funding. Right now, nobody's tracking the amount of stuff we get from a ship or how far it has to come. And we keep concentrating on the SUV and the drive to work and the drive to Walmart and the drive to beach, when our emissions from the shipping industry, the world economy, just dwarfs that. And here we are, another year, another round of funding, and they're going to fund all these other programs that help them concentrate on the wrong thing. Unfortunately, most of our climate change policy emanates from what they do. And if they're never going to study the ship emissions and the nautical miles our stuff really has to travel, they're giving everybody a false picture and enabling them to run on with this improper resiliency and everything else. You got to give them money to study where our stuff comes from and how many lane miles and nautical miles has to travel to get here. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, there we go. That helps. Thank you, Chair Theringer. Just to move down the line, it looks like we had Krista Milhofer, who did not come up in person, and Mike Raymond. Okay, so I'm going to move forward and call up Lisa Votsky, Dave Maston, and Nathan Gordon in person.
And then remote.
And then remote, yes, we have Harold Hilseth, Ben Wick, and Danny Madrone.
Is this on? Yes.
Yep, go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair and committee. I'm Lisa Vatsky, Director of Multifamily Housing and Community Facilities with the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, here to testify in support of 1149. The need for additional resources in housing is evident and necessary. We have, and we're very supportive of a big infusion to try to help support the crisis and create more affordable units. The commission just had their intents to apply for our tax-exempt bond round, and we got over $800 million in requests, trying to create close to 5,000 units, and we'll have about $250 million to actually allocate. So there is a robust pipeline of ready-to-go projects. This accelerator program that's created in House Bill 1149 would move a lot of these units that won't get funded otherwise much quicker and be able to really help create an infusion of new resources to create more housing. We're here to help answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Theringer and committee. My name is Nathan Gorton with Washington Realtors, representing more than 23,000 realtors across the state in support of the ideas in House Bill 1149. You may know that Washington State ranks 50th in number of housing units per family, and we applaud the governor in coming forward with a really big and bold idea. It's a big and bold idea that we're going to need if we're going to fix the housing crisis that we have. We need not just funding that this bill represents, but also lots of housing policy bills. We are proud to support the governor in this big, bold idea and hope that you all will work with us to keep moving it forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we'll go to remote. We'll go to Krista Milhofer. Go ahead, Krista.
All right, thank you. My name is Krista Melhofer, and I represent People First of Washington, 1,000 Washington State constituents and advocates with developmental disabilities, including those who have experienced institutionalization in state facilities, and we are signed in as CON. National deinstitutionalization of people with disabilities began in 1961, and the last bill to close a Washington State institution passed in 2011. Now, with a long list of people wanting to get out, this budget proposes spending $200 million in taxpayer dollars on those facilities, including building a new one. Institutions are not, have never been, and never will be successful schools, villages, or rehabilitation centers, and place the remaining 456 people at higher risk. Alternatives to institutions exist in the state system but are underfunded, and we want you to consider sponsoring or prioritizing funding that brings missing resources to families in each of your districts by transferring those dollars to the Dan Thompson Housing Trust Fund. Hope you'll make the best informed decision for our community, and please check your email for supporting documents in my full testimony.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony. Ben Wick, go ahead.
Oh, good afternoon. My name is Councilmember Ben Wick, representing the city of Spokane Valley, which is the ninth largest city in the state. There's two topics I want to cover. First is the city supports the level of funding allocated to the Washington Wildlife and Recreation Program in the governor's proposal. Please meet or exceed this level of funding as you develop the final budget. And second, the city requests funding for the Spokane Valley Performing Arts Center through direct appropriations and increased funding to the Youth Recreational Facility Program. Our region lacks the facilities needed to allow our youth and adults opportunities to experience and access performing arts. However, there is hope. Our community has developed and raised significant local funds to create a facility with a 475-seat main stage, 200-seat flexible studio theater, and an acting conservancy for the youth. We're seeking the state to partner with the community in funding this important project. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Danny Madrone, go ahead, please.
Hello, my name is Danny Madrone. I'm here with the American Farmland Trust in support of HB 1147. We are grateful that the governor included $4 million for the Farmland Protection and Land Access Program at the State Conservation Commission. Washington is at risk of losing significant farmland to development. The Washington Food Policy Forum has recommended significant funding for programs like FPLA to protect farmland. Farmland preservation is also a key strategy for Puget Sound recovery. FPLA is already working to save farmland. An initial $2 million was allocated last year. Within the first 6 months, more than half of the initial allocation is on its way to protecting almost 200 acres, with more projects in the pipeline. FPLA fills a critical gap in a multi-partner effort, leveraging the resources of a revolving loan program at the Housing Finance Commission, which prioritizes access for beginning and historically underserved farmers. I sent a letter to the leadership of this committee that reflects a strong coalition of farmland enthusiasts that includes land trusts, agricultural interests, and civic organizations. We are united in our support for this program. Thank you.
Thank you. And Madam Vice Chair, are there folks in the room you would like to call up?
I think I'd like to call up Nick Federici and Joe Daca and Michelle Thomas.
So I think, Michelle, you're remote, so why don't you go ahead?
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Michelle Thomas with the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. I'm sorry, I'm sideways. Let's just ignore that. I'm signed in on the capital budget and pro House Bill 1149. Our ask of you is that you both fully fund the Housing Trust Fund at $400 million in the regular capital budget and also pass the referendum bill to add additional funds that our communities need to solve our crisis. Based on forthcoming report by the Department of Commerce, Washington needs 1 million additional homes by 2044, and 72% of those homes are needed for the very low-income people that the for-profit market won't build homes for, and that will need public subsidy. The time's now to fully fund the Housing Trust Fund at $400 million in your capital budget and also pass House Bill 1149 to add additional resources. Additionally, the Housing Alliance asks you to fund the land acquisition program at $35 million that is in the governor's capital budget, but please fund it out of the regular budget and not out of referendum funds. This program is critical to ensuring equity and preventing gentrification as we look to upzone single-family neighborhoods. We also have some amendment requests on House Bill 1149 that we'd like to work with stakeholders on. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to go to the panel. Mr. Daca, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Joe Dacca with the University of Washington, testifying in support today as this budget fully funds the majority of our requests, including Phase 2 of renovation of Magnuson Health Sciences Center, which is the primary teaching space for all 6 of our health sciences schools, design and renovation of Anderson Hall, which supports our school environmental and forest sciences in Seattle, Phase 2 of design and construction of the Intellectual House, which serves our American Indian and Alaska Native students, and design funding for the modernization of our chemical sciences facility, which is a critical project for dated facilities that need to be updated. We do ask that you consider funding for UW-Tacoma to acquire additional land for their campus footprint. We look forward to working with you, and thank you again to the governor for his support in this budget.
Thank you. And before we get to Mr. Federici, Madam Vice Chair, you want to call up some
remote folks?
Some remote folks?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'd like to call forward Courtney Tom, Michael McKinley, and Bin Laden, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Federici. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Welcome back. And to those of you who are new, welcome. Nick Federici with United Way of King County and United Ways of the Pacific Northwest, covering the full state. Wearing my rain jacket because it's kind of rainy out there, and thousands of our neighbors are out there in it with no place to go and no place to live. So I want to encourage you to support the governor's proposed referendum package, as well as the capital budget that he's put forward, to help house tens of thousands of our neighbors who right now don't have a place to live or don't have a place affordably to live. The governor's package is $4 billion. I know that's a big bite. If you have capacity for that in your capital budget, I'm more than happy to talk about that. But it seems like extraordinary times require extraordinary measures. You've heard the phrase "go big or go home." I would urge you to go big before you go home and create homes for people that don't have them right now or who can't afford a safe, warm place to live. We really applaud the governor for his ambition and his vision in this, and would urge you to do so as well. We know there's quibbles about what's in it and how to do it. Happy to talk about how to do it best that gets the biggest bang for your buck in the public. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think on remote testimony, Byron Adden, is that correct? I see
yes.
You on there. Hello, welcome.
Hello. Greetings, Chair Theringer, Vice Chairs Callan and Hackney, and members of the committee. My name is Bilan Aiden, and I'm the Associate Director for African Community Housing and Development, and I am testifying in support of House Bill 1149. We are based in the 33rd District and serve the African immigrant refugee community in King County and around the state. As a community-led and founded organization specializing in culturally specific housing and social services and economic development programs, we know that housing insecurity is a complex issue with no one-size-fits-all solution. Since 2020, we served over 12,000 residents of Washington, providing $38 million in rental assistance. And our community members often have largest family sizes. The average size is 7, which makes it difficult to find affordable rental housing, much less move into home ownership. The lack of affordable family-sized rental housing leads to high levels of family and youth homelessness. Even when a family finds housing, it is often not large enough. Many families must then make the difficult decision to break up and send their children to live with others. Thank you for your time and consideration, and we hope that you approve this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And Madam Vice Chair, are there folks you want to call up in the room before we get to Michael McKinley on the remote?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'd like to call up Daryl Jennings, Chris Bailey, and Rebecca Woods.
And while they're coming up, Michael McKinley, would you like to testify? Give us your video and your audio, please.
Hi, Michael McKinley, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Michael McKinley speaking for myself. I'm against House Bill 1149. The bill doesn't specify what we're going to get for the $4 billion. It doesn't specify the number of housing units. It doesn't specify where they're going to be located. It's basically a blank check. The expected dollar amount for bonds exceeds the state debt service limit, a fiscal firewall established in 1972, by about $1 billion a year. There's no long-term stated specific funding source, The people that participate have to have at least a household income, at least here in Pierce County, of $38,000. In King County, I think it's $51,000 to qualify, not really a homeless individual's level. The program will be administered by the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. They have never done a project of this magnitude or complexity. I ask you to please vote no on this bill. If you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. And we have, I guess we can let's go to Ivanova Smith on the remote. Hello.
Hello, this is Ivanova Smith. I am a constituent of the 29th Legislative District and a member of People First of Washington. I'm against the capital budget because I believe that these institutions that they're wanting to build and keep funding with this budget is really harmful to people with disabilities and has not helped people with disabilities live a fulfilling life. People end up getting very neglected and harmed in these institutions and having their personhood restricted. And we really want this funding to go to actually supporting people living their lives in the community and not in restricting people's lives. So do they ask that the capital funding be used for housing for people in less restrictive environments where their autonomy is respected and that they're respected as people and not imprisoned for having disabilities. Special services and buildings should be used to help people be served in the community and supported in the community. Thank you.
For your testimony, Ms. Smith. And Madam Vice Chair, if you want to tee up some other remote testifiers, we will go, and then we'll go to the people on the panel in the room.
Thank you. I'd like to I'd like to call up Naomi Morris, Dennis Seals, and then I just wanted to check on, I think that's that list. So Brian Freeman.
Okay. So go ahead on the panel there.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Theringer and members of the committee. My name is Daryl Jennings, and I'm the Capital Budget Director with the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. I'd like to thank you for this committee's past support for our system and for considering our capital request. We also appreciate the support received in the governor's proposal. Your community college system served over 260,000 students last year. Our colleges train tomorrow's workforce for high-demand jobs in areas such as clean energy, advanced manufacturing, and allied health. The community and technical college system offers something for every student. Students come back for basic education skills, those that attend to transfer, and others achieve workforce certifications and credentials from our system. We're requesting minor works funding for our highest priority repairs, infrastructure replacements, and projects that enable colleges to address immediate program needs and keep campus spaces relevant and useful. The 8 major capital projects in the governor's proposal will enable colleges to right-size space with the right space through renovations and replacing buildings that are functionally obsolete. Finally, we appreciate this body and the governor for recognizing and following the results of our vigorous prioritization process, and thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, and I believe we're also being joined with Rebecca Woods from Columbia Basin remotely. I'm Chris Bailey. I'm president of Lower Columbia College in Longview, Washington. And first, I want to express my appreciation that a new vocational building for Lower Columbia College was included in the governor's capital budget proposal. The proposed building will house our welding, machining, manufacturing, and IT programs, all high-demand, high-wage occupations, as well as our high school and college preparation programs. These programs benefit not only the graduates and their families, but they also benefit the region's small businesses, large industries, and trade unions. My local community has a large manufacturing base and is the home to multiple ports. My local community does not have a regional high school skills center in our service area, so this building will also provide dual credit opportunities for K-12 students. And finally, the project will bring additional construction jobs to our local community. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Madam Vice Chair to call up the next panel for in the room, and then after that we'll go to the folks that are remote.
Okay, and just to verify that we had called out Rebecca as in person, but apparently she's remote, so if we could promote her and bring her in at the same time, that would be great. And then sorry, let me have this piece of paper. It's a paper shuffle here for me. Brian Shea, Ruth Clemens, Jay Gordon, and Lynette Buffington. You might have to pull the chair forward for 4 people.
And while they're coming to the dais for the in the room testimony, we're going to go on to remote to Dennis Sills. Dennis, go ahead.
Chair Theringer, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to comment on HB 1149. My name is Dennis Sills, and I work at Plymouth Housing in King County. Plymouth Housing is a member of the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance and the Housing Development Consortium, and we support their comments on the bond proposal. Plymouth Housing provides permanent supportive housing to more than 1,100 residents in King County. Most of our residents are chronically homeless and are able to gain housing stability at Plymouth. Our housing is only possible with investment from the state. We applaud Governor Inslee, the chair, and many of your colleagues in the House and Senate for supporting the $4 billion bond proposal over 6 years to support housing development services. The proposal, paired with strong capital and operating budgets, can help us provide more homes across the state. For providers to continue to answer the call and serve thousands of residents, we are grateful for HB 1149 and encourage the legislature to move this bond proposal to the ballot. Thank you.
And we'll go to, is Rebecca now is in the room? We can go to Rebecca. Go ahead, please, Rebecca. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Theringer and members of the committee. I'm Rebecca Woods. I have the privilege of serving as the president of Columbia Basin College in the Tri-Cities. The governor's capital budget proposal, as just mentioned, funds through number 8 of our capital projects on our list, and we would ask the committee to consider including projects number 9 and 10. So including the Performing Arts Building Replacement Project, which is number 16 on our prioritized list. The building is more than 50 years old. The structural issues within the building are significant. It was built prior to ADA standards and is not able to be retrofitted. There are classrooms within the building that are not accessible by someone with a physical limitation, and when this happens, our only option is to move the class. We have more than 2,500 students that take classes within that building alone each year, not just those that are majoring in art, music, or theater, but those that are in our other programs such as nursing, nuclear technology, and teacher education, and they're receiving a well-rounded education by taking their general education courses within art, music, or theater. We also have more than 25,000 attendees each year that come through the facility in attendance at one of our concerts, plays, or art exhibits. Our Performing Arts Building is a critical instructional as well as cultural resource for our students, our campus, and our community. Funding our Performing Arts Center would not only allow us to create student-centered, flexible, and adaptable environments essential for student success, but is also a jobs bill for the Tri-Cities that will provide construction jobs within our community. I would also ask you to consider the next capital request, which is a technology and engineering center at Whatcom Community College that will house their cybersecurity program and center of excellence. During the last session, the legislature provided funding for the Center of Excellence and additional capacity within cybersecurity programs.
Can you please wrap up, Ms. Woods?
Yes, this is also the opportunity to fund the infrastructure needed to deliver those critical programs. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to, I see Brian, you've been waiting patiently, so we'll go to Brian Freeman on the remote. Brian, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, and members of the committee. My name is Brian Freeman, Superintendent of Curlew School District, a small district located in Ferry County. I'd like to thank the governor for including $2.4 million in his proposed budget to support planning grants under the Small School District Modernization Grant Program. However, the proposed funding of $40.7 million in the construction grants is inadequate. I strongly support and encourage you to fully fund the entire list of projects in the Small District Modernization Grant Construction Program, totaling $100 million. The state acknowledges the significant building deficiencies in small school districts and the inability of many small districts like my own to fund these deficiencies. The state also is requiring school districts to comply with new energy standards, which only highlights building deficiencies. Our school is an example of a building with system deficiencies in a district with low property value. In particular case, the planning grant is for HVAC, lighting, structural support, and ADA upgrades. Curlew has deficiencies like other schools that extend beyond these needs. I ask you to fully fund the currently approved school district planning and construction grants, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer questions now or in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. And Madam Vice Chair, before we go to the panel in the room, would you like to call up some more remote testifiers?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to call up remotely Tasha Irving, Susan Foster Dow, Linda Grant, and Maureen Sorensen.
All right, and we'll go to our esteemed panel from Grace Harbor.
I'll start off. Good afternoon, Chair Theringer and Ranking Member Steele and members of the committee. I'm Ruth Clemens. I'm the City Administrator for the City of Aberdeen. I'm here to seek your support on building critical levees around the cities of Aberdeen and Hoquiam. Our communities experience persistent and devastating floods. The combination of coastal flooding from high tides and localized flooding from intense rain inundates us with water. Grace Harbor County has had 17 federally declared disasters since 1974, and there have been countless others that didn't receive that designation. Property owners in the flood zone have to purchase mandatory flood insurance. On the conservative end, our community is paying $2.2 million in flood insurance premiums each year. In the last 50 years, there have been $3 million in flood insurance claims paid. This means our community is paying out over $2 million a year in insurance, and in over 50 years, only $3 million has come back to the community. That means over 50 years, 97% of this money from our community has left our community. An example of an insurance requirement that is unique to properties in the flood zone: if the owner of a piece of property in the flood zone wants to make improvements to his or her home, and the improvements are more than 50% of the value of the property, the lowest floor of the property must be raised above the flood elevation, which in some cases could be 7 feet. So that could be impossible for people to attain. We're eager to solve this problem, not only to remove the financial burden of flood insurance, but to eliminate the perpetual devastation that flooding has caused our community generation after generation. We're here today because the governor's proposed capital budget doesn't allocate funding to this critical and time-sensitive project. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Brian Shea to explain the plan we've developed and how you can help.
Good timing.
Good afternoon, Chair Theringer and Ranking Member Steele. I am Brian Shea, the City Administrator for the City of Hoquiam. The cities of Aberdeen and Hoquiam have been working collaboratively for the past 8 years to develop a flood plan to address persistent flooding. The Aberdeen-Hoquiam Flood Protection Plan has 3 components: a major pump station and 2 big levees. The plan costs $182.6 million, and we are 80% funded. The pump station, which costs nearly $22 million, is fully funded, and work is underway. The 2 remaining components are the North Shore Levee and the North Shore Levee West segment, which only lack $35 million from being fully funded. Despite being recommended for funding by the Office of Chehalis Basin, this project was not included in the governor's budget. Our secured funding to date includes nearly $100 million in federal dollars, which translates into nearly $10 million in state sales tax. Our cities have committed $15 million of local money, and a commitment of $35.5 million from the state would achieve the full match requirements and fully fund the project. We know you have difficult decisions about prioritized investments in the capital budget. We are here today to urge you to include the final $35.5 million for the North Shore Levee and the North Shore Levee West segment, so our community can experience relief from devastating floods and our economic opportunities can be unlocked.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi there. Good afternoon, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, members of the committee. I am Lynette Buffington, the CEO of Greater Grace Harbor, Inc., which is the regional EDC, ADO, and Chamber of Commerce. Grays Harbor County is one of the most economically disadvantaged counties in the state. According to ESD, in 2020, Grays Harbor's poverty rate was 15.1%. That's significantly higher than the state's rate of 9.5. OFM rated in 2022, Grays Harbor County had the 7th lowest median household income in the state. Greater Grays Harbor works to promote the advantages of investing and relocating to our community. Grays Harbor has beaches, mountains, forests, and lakes, an affordable cost of living, a growing transit system, and a very strong sense of community. But the factor slowing economic growth in Aberdeen and Hoquiam specifically is the flood zone. The financial burdens of rebuilding, the increased costs associated with flood insurance, and reduced development and investment opportunities in the community negatively impact the local economy. In the past 4 years, Aberdeen and Hoquiam have lost an estimated 842 jobs due to floods. Greater Grays Harbor supports the city's request for $35.5 million to complete both segments of the levee project. Once constructed, these levees will relieve 5,100 properties, 1,354 businesses, and 1,292 jobs from the cost and burden of being in a designated flood zone. We strongly encourage you to prioritize funding for the Aberdeen-Hoquiam Flood Protection Project in the capital budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Theringer, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jay Gordon. I'm here today on behalf of the Chehalis Basin, Office Chehalis Basin. We fully support this funding. This is one of those rare times the Office Chehalis Basin and the effort in the basin has taken a number of years to get this project ginned up to where it's at today, and it's one of the few times where you look and say, state and local match of $35 million leverages $100 million in federal to complete a project out there on the coast to protect Aberdeen and Hoquiam. We ask for your support. It is not included in the governor's budget, and we would ask that you would consider it for support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. And Madam Chair, do you want to call out some other folks that are in the room, and then we'll go to testimony, remote testimony.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to call up Dave Maston. I'd like to call Ryan Donahue and Nora Sealander.
Great. And while they're coming up, we'll go to Tasha Irving. Go ahead, Tasha. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Tasha Irvine, and I'm a consultant with Principal Allies, the firm that Catholic Community Services contracted with to develop the master plan to bring the Rising Strong program in Spokane to Western Washington, which we're very pleased is included in the governor's budget. Developed by Catholic Charities in Eastern Washington, Rising Strong is a family-centered drug treatment and housing program focused on serving families while they recover from addiction, heal from trauma, and rebuild their lives. Over the past 2 years, we've convened DCYF, Commerce, HCA, the Department of Health, MCOs, and community-based organizations. We evaluated several options for development, including rehabilitation and new construction, to determine the most efficient alternative. Deacon Construction's cost estimates, akin to a pre-design, form the basis for the capital request. While the need is great enough to open multiple sites in the state, our master plan recommends the first site in Western Washington be located in Snohomish County, developed and operated by Evergreen Recovery Centers. This location will serve King, Pierce, and Snohomish County families. We hope that this project leads to the opening of many Rising Strong programs across the state, and the master plan serves as a blueprint for future investments. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen Sorensen. Go ahead, Maureen Sorensen, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Theringer and Vice Chair Callan and members of the committee. I'm honored to be here today talking to you about the importance of Rising Strong in Western Washington. My name is Maureen Sorensen. I'm the Senior Director of Foster Care Operations at Coordinated Care. I am also an instructor at the University of Washington in the School of Social Work and Criminal Justice. DCYF reports that neglect and parent substance use are contributing factors statewide for children entering out-of-home care. In 2020 in Washington state, nearly 70% of infants entering out-of-home care had a parent with substance use disorder. That same year, 585 newborns were placed in their first 30 days due to parental substance use, 47% of which were in King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties. Coordinated Care is the sole Medicaid plan serving children and youth in foster care through our Apple Health Core Connections program. As such, we are the medical plan for children at Rising Strong. Over the years, we've designed a specialized plan for our members who've experienced foster care because we know about their unique needs. We have also listened to their parents.
We believe the best thing you can do for a child is take care of their parents, and the best way a family can heal is together. This is what Rising Strong does. Western Washington lacks a program to provide family-centered substance use disorder treatment that allows families to stay together, but the need is high, as you know. We strongly encourage you to support the $13.4 million request in the budget for Rising Strong in Western Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Foster Dow, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, committee members. My name is Susan Foster Dow, and I'm the Chief Mission and Strategy Officer for Catholic Charities Eastern Washington. Rising Strong Spokane opened in 2017 as an innovative pilot project tackling the trauma caused by substance use that leads to separation of children from parents. After 5 years, we know that the Rising Strong model works. From preliminary data, we see families reunify faster in weeks rather than in years. They stay in treatment at a rate 3 times higher than traditional treatment centers, and they relapse less. Jeff and Jerica's story illustrates the power of this program. Separated from their kids and struggling with addiction, they did the tough work to stabilize, reunify, and graduate last spring. Since moving into one of our supportive housing apartments, both have now finished school and earned promotions at work. Their kids are safe and healthy, and their family is together. We hear the reminder, kids don't want a different family. They want their own family to be different. Rising Strong provides that opportunity to create a different family outcome, as Jeff and Jerica and many other families who graduate from Rising Strong are doing, better for themselves and for generations to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Naomi Morris, I think you're in the remote, correct?
I am.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Naomi Morris, and I'm a community outreach psychiatric nurse working in Seattle and an executive board member of the SEIU Healthcare 1199 Northwest. The work that my colleagues and I do to care for the most vulnerable is harder than you can know. We need you to step up for behavioral health and housing workers so that we can continue our work of helping people get and stay housed and healthy. I've testified before elected leaders like yourself many times on the challenges of my work, and I've brought many different emotions to these moments. There are times I've been angry, there are times I have been concerned, and there are times I've been hurting. Today, in preparing to talk with you, though, I realize I'm coming with hope and positivity. The potential of $4 million of housing makes me hopeful. Hearing my government focus on the challenges I have dedicated myself to makes me feel promise. If you know what I knew, you would know that the people can get better, but they can only get better if we have a healthy, suitable home to support them in. I'm speaking from my experience working with unhoused populations. I work on the PAC unit, which deals with clients with a history of multiple hospitalizations and/or jail visits, and places them in housing surrounded by the right community and support so that they can heal, thrive, and find success. I'm holding in my mind the stories of so many clients I've worked with that have found the kind of success I want for them as their nurse, that you want for them as policymakers, but most importantly, that they want for themselves. These are folks who I met at a point where they were difficult to engage after multiple hospitals and jail stays, but the change happens when they move into permanent supportive housing and approachability becomes easier.
Can you wrap up, Ms. Morris, please?
Yes, sir. Staying on medication and making progress on treatment plans requires the stability of a safe home, a home that's made their own. I thank you for hearing me today, and that's it.
Thank you. And Ms. Grant, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to address the Rising Strong program that we've heard about. I am Linda Grant. I'm the CEO of Evergreen Recovery Centers, a nonprofit providing 5 Puget Sound counties with behavioral health services for the last 50 years. Included in our services are residential treatment and transitional housing, and we were the first pregnant and parenting moms program for the state, established in 1999. We own property adjacent to that program that is zoned and ready for development for housing. We've had that in our strategic plan for years, and we are delighted to have the opportunity to adapt the Rising Strong program and establish it in Western Washington. I've been a huge fan and proponent of that for years. And we have a 35-bed facility for women on that campus. We are expanding it for 18 units that are for larger families. and including a pediatric transitional care unit for mothers that are experiencing for the children that are experiencing withdrawal from opioids. We are an integrated mental health, primary health care organization, and we are eager to start a program, and we urge that you have in your budget, when you move it out, an item for $13.4 million as the governor has established. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And before we get to our panel in the chamber, Madam Vice Chair, do you want to tee up some other remote testifiers?
Thank you. I'd like to call remotely Jim Kokowski, Russ Pfeiffer-Hoyt, and Jessica Renner.
Superintendent.
Mr. Maston, welcome.
I'm on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Steele, Dave Maston with the Association of Washington Business, here to testify on the housing bond bill. I signed in as other, and I wanted to give some context to that. As most of us know, we've seen the Lieutenant Governor come out with a proposal. Our former Governor, Governor Gregoire, has been working on housing, and we've seen the proposal before us from our present governor. $4 billion over 6 years. Do appreciate that there's a public vote. I do want to make a couple of comments, though, to keep in mind as you're looking at this. Number one, we're last in housing units in the country. Our permit time is between 6.5 months to over a year to get permits. Over the last 30 years, our population has grown 60%. Our housing has grown 33%. We are spending a lot of money on the permit timeline. If you talk to people who build homes, it is a significant challenge, and we need to address that. I'm asking the legislature to look at that and address that, because not only is that true in the private sector, it's also on public dollars, right? For every dollar that you're looking at here to vote on, how much of that is going because of the delays in permitting and the difficulty of finding appropriate land? So all of this that impacts the private sector significantly, as we're aware of, also impacts the public sector and the funding for the low-income housing that this proposal is looking at. So we'd encourage you to look at all those things, and we want to partner with you on doing that. AWB is there to solve this, to be part of the solution in housing in our state. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, and members of the committee. My name is Ryan Donahue, and I'm the Chief Advocacy Officer over at Habitat for Humanity, Seattle, King, and Kittitas counties. I'm here today to testify in support of both the Governor's capital budget proposal as well as the bond measure. We were ecstatic to see the robust investment in the capital budget for housing and home ownership. One thing we would urge you to consider is finding more ways to invest more upfront within the budget itself as opposed to relying on the bond measure. Speaking of the bond measure, though, I do want to make sure to highlight that the bond measure clearly shows that this state understands that it's past time for us to not just declare that we're facing a housing emergency, but actually invest in a broad range of housing solutions, the kind of solutions that'll be necessary if we're going to be able to tackle this problem head on. As we at Habitat see it, these are much needed funds that are a physical manifestation of our vision statement. We're working to build a world where everyone has a safe, decent, and affordable place to call home. Both the governor's budget and the bond measure will help us get there. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Seelander, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, and members of the committee. I'm Nora Seelander, representing Western Washington University, testifying pro on this budget because it supports our top priorities, including the design and build of a Student Development and Success Center, pre-designed dollars for renovating our aging environmental studies building, critical safety and IT infrastructure upgrades, and design funds for converting our campus heating system in alignment with the state's sustainability's goals. As always, funding for minor works and classroom upgrades allows Western's campus to be an environment where our students can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go to our folks that are on remote, Madam Vice Chair, do you want to call up some folks that are in the room, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to call up Carly Colgan, Commissioner Kristen Eng, and Steve DuPont.
And while they're coming up, we're going to turn to Jim Wowski, please go ahead. I don't know if I had enough syllables in there, but go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Theringer. You did great. Members of the committee, my name is Jim Kokowski. I serve as the director for the Rural Lead Center, statewide cooperative, representing over 90 small and rural districts across the state. I'm asking you today to increase the proposed capital budget funding amount in House Bill 1147 for the small district modernization grants. The governor's proposed budget does include funding that would allow 19 small districts to complete their projects. However, there are 22 additional school districts waiting in the hopper that have already completed their planning grants and are ready to get their projects out for bid. They just need the funding. There are also 72 additional small districts that have submitted requests to OSPI for initial planning grants for this program. In total, that's 113 districts requesting funding for their facilities. That's almost 40% of the total number of districts in our state that are begging for help with facility deficiencies. In closing, please go bigger and bolder to help our small rural districts take care of their urgent facility needs so they can provide the children they serve with safe and adequate buildings. I urge you to fully fund the 41 districts with shovel-ready projects. Thank you for all your work. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And Jessica Renner, go ahead, please. Jessica? And Jessica, we'll come back to you if we need to tee up the tape for your testimony. And we'll go to Russ Pfeiffer-Hoyt. Go ahead, Mr. Hoyt.
It's good afternoon, Chair Theringer and members of the committee. My name is Russ Pfeiffer-Hoyt, and I'm testifying in support of SB 5200 on behalf of the Washington State School Directors Association.
My name is Jessica Renner. I can say
First, I want to thank
Mr. Pfeiffer-Hoyt, maybe if you could just hold for a second and we see if we can get Jessica's testimony here. Jessica, are you ready to testify?
I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead, please.
My name is Jessica Renner. I'm a town advocate for the 33 Washington districts. I here testify on behalf of town advocate Phil. We are opposing my government budget to push billions in the institutions, and I like to oppose, but people live in the community and not in institutions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Renner. And Mr. Pfeiffer-Hoyt, we'll come back to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you again. As I said, I'm here testifying on behalf of Washington State School Directors Association, and I really thank you for your continued support for public education. And secondly, we really appreciate that this budget funds small school district modernization projects with common school trust revenue. We believe that this change in funding is important as it acknowledges and supports the school districts that are often left behind in funding safe, healthy, and effective school buildings. In addition to this important change, it's imperative that you keep the SCAP whole as to not harm the remainder of the school districts in the state. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. And Madam Vice Chair, if you want to tee up some folks for remote testimony before we get to the folks that are in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to call remotely Sean Latham, Wes Jessup, and Rebecca Mindendorp.
Great. And whoever wants to start on the panel, go ahead, please.
Oh, go ahead. Good afternoon, Chair Theringer and members of the committee. My name is Carly Colgan, and I am speaking on behalf of Habitat for Humanity of Washington State, representing 25 Habitat affiliates, including my own here in Thurston County. I am signed in enthusiastically pro to this capital budget because of its historic investment of $75 million in affordable homeownership. This allocation is a transformative investment that rightly expands on the legislature's previous historic commitment into affordable homeownership organizations like Habitat for Humanity that will help expand access to homes for hundreds of families just wanting a shot at the American dream. These families are primarily from communities of color, with over 60% of the families served by Habitat from these communities disadvantaged from a history of exclusion in housing. They are our neighbors, the hairstylist, the postal worker, the nurse, the single mother among us. For Habitat for Humanity, we are ready and able to utilize funding quickly and effectively, with over $30 million of project needs from Habitat affiliates submitted to the Housing Trust Fund for the existing $25 million, supporting the affordable homeownership industry's 500 units that are shovel-ready. We strongly urge the committee to adopt the governor's budget investment into affordable homeownership and continue the committee's previous commitment on prioritizing supporting Washington families. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Kristen Ang, Port of Tacoma Commissioner. The Port of Tacoma makes strategic investments in our harbor and our communities to promote prosperity, trade, and jobs while protecting and enhancing our environment. These investments support over 42,000 family wage jobs and generate $200 million in local and state taxes every biennium. We're here today to flag two specific issues. First, we support a capital budget request by the Tacoma School District for a South Sound Maritime Workforce Training Facility. In fact, we have sent a letter of intent to the school district that the port would like to host the new facility on port property. Second, we support the governor's proposed funding level for remedial action grants. 2 Port of Tacoma projects are included in Ecology's work plan and would proceed should these dollars be appropriated as recommended. Cleaning up contaminated sites is not only good for the environment, but also put these properties back into productive use, generating tax dollars for Washington State and jobs for Washington residents. According to a Department of Ecology study, every dollar spent on remediation results in $7 in long-term payroll, $32 in business revenue, and $6 in tax revenue as these cleaned up properties are put into productive use. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Theringer, members of the committee. I'm Steve DuPont with Central Washington University, and we're in strong support of the governor's proposed capital budget for our university. It funds our top priority construction project. We're calling it the North Academic Complex. It was funded for design as the Humanities and Social Science Complex in the current biennium. It's going to replace 2 academic buildings that are really failing. One's leaning and plugged with Mount St. Helens ash, and both are very energy inefficient and sets us back in terms of compliance with the Clean Buildings Act. So we'd really encourage you to support the construction funding for that. And by the way, it's going to be heated with renewable geothermal heating because the Ellensburg area is a prime location for accessing that free heat from the earth. The governor's budget also provides $6 million for a multicultural center on our campus. The students are providing the majority of the funds, but we would really like to have that project. The only small ask we'd have, if you can consider, is a $300,000 pre-design request for a future arts education complex. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we go to the folks that are on remote, Madam Vice Chair will call up some other folks in the room. And I just want to compliment everybody on their patience as we do this dance between remote and in person. And it's relatively smooth, but again, appreciate your patience on all this. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to call up in the room David Burry, Ian Goodhue, and Paula Sardinius, please.
And while they're coming up, Mr. Jessup, would you like to testify, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman of the committee. I'm Wes Jessup, Executive Director of the Eastern Washington State Historical Society. I'd like to thank the Governor's Office for supporting each item in our $2.6 million capital budget this year. We support this budget, and I'd like to highlight some of the necessary infrastructure items that address an aging campus. Briefly, we're looking for a new roof membrane and gutters for our admissions building to prevent the risk of falling sheets of ice in the winter. We're looking to replace our security and door locks, which have aged out and present a security concern to our collection of over 60,000 objects. Also, the 20-year-old sprinkler system that needs to be replaced, and which will decrease water waste. Finally, we hope to remodel our cafe, which is a critical source of operating revenue for our organization. Thank you so much for your support, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Latham, Sean Latham, are you ready to testify, please?
Yes, I am.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Farah and Jeer, and members of the committee. My name is Sean Latham from the 22nd District and the Director of Allies in Advocacy, a DD self-advocacy and civil rights organization. Allies is very concerned with the direction that the governor's capital budget is going in, because we seem to continually put millions of dollars into fixing or replacing developmental disability institutional buildings. If my math is right, we are spending nearly $200 million on them this time. While I get people should live in safe places, our money would be better spent on the Housing Trust Fund, community residential housing and services. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Latham. And Ms. Mendendrop, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, and members of the committee. I'm Rebecca Miedendorf, a parent in the 44th Legislative District, speaking on behalf of the Washington State PTA, the state's largest child advocacy organization, specifically on Section 5019 and seismic retrofits. We would like to thank the legislature for recognizing last session the importance of safe schools and seismic safety. The $100 million from last session was very much appreciated. We'd like to thank Governor Inslee for including another $40 million in this program this year. That said, we are hoping that amount can be boosted as you begin to develop your budget proposals so that more schools will benefit from this critical investment. There's an 83% chance of a magnitude 6.5 earthquake in the next 50 years, and 70% of our schools are in high seismic risk areas. In a 2021 Washington State study, 93% of school buildings sampled were rated the lowest, meaning in a large earthquake, they would collapse, leading to death, injury, and entrapment of students and staff. Washington State PTA's position is to fully fund the program as much as possible this session. We would encourage you to increase this amount from $40 million back to $100 million a biennium. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will go to folks on the panel at this point.
Thank you very much, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele. I'm David Buray from Eastern Washington University, here in support of the governor's budget. Really appreciate the fact that it funds the second and final phase of our science building. You've been hearing about that for years. This will be the last time I come in front of you for asking for science buildings, I'm hoping. Also has Martin, they're expensive. Also Martin Williamson pre-design, yes, I know. Martin Williamson pre-design of $350,000 is there. We very much appreciate that. That's a core building built in the 30s, beautiful building, but it's time for it to be updated, so there's pre-design for that. If there's some work to be done, I would hope it could be done in the infrastructure. We asked for 15, governor's budget funds just short of 8. We'll settle for 12. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is that the attitude you bring to the testimony, Mr. Goodhue?
Oh, I don't know, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please.
Ian Goodhue here on behalf of UW-Medicine, here in support of the governor's budget. There's one medicine-specific item, and that's a $13 million request to fund the additional beds that you all added to the behavioral health teaching hospital that UW-Medicine is building at our Northwest Hospital campus. Again, these are for 25 extra beds, so those can be added to the behavioral health teaching hospital. This $13 million will fund then the renovation of our Gero Psych unit. It's the only Gero Psych unit in the state outside of the state facilities, and so that $13 million is really crucial to us completing what has now been a 3 or 4 year project. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony. And Madam Vice Chair, we have folks in the remote, but before we let them testify, could you call up folks that might want to testify out of the room, please?
Yes, I think we have ready to go. We have Catherine Gerdau. We have Chris Maycutt.
Yeah, she's remote, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, this is, I'm sorry, so I don't think did we call this panel? I'm calling their names
Yeah,
out.
they're ready to go remotely. I'm wondering if there's anybody
Michael
in the room.
Olson, and then in the room we'll have, we did call Paula. Did she not come forward? Connor Haggerty. And then we have Jeff DeLuca, Ross Quigley.
Great. And as they're coming up, we'll turn to the remote. And Mr. Cordero, would you please, Catherine, please testify? Can you hear us, Catherine?
Yes, yes. Hi, good afternoon, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, and members of the committee. I'm Catherine Gardo, Chair of the Public Works Board and a 43rd District constituent and also a civil engineer. On behalf of our 13-member board, I'd like to thank the governor for including $400 million in his proposed capital budget for our traditional infrastructure programs. This is the first time in more than a decade that the board has seen such a large investment in the state's oldest infrastructure program that provides low-interest loans and grants to your cities, counties, water and sewer districts, and PUDs. And I am super excited at this. Governor's proposed investment includes the long-awaited return of the diverted revenues. 6 years ago, a deal was made to take almost $350 million a biennium from the Public Works Assistance account with a sunset of the diversions on June 30th of this year. We hope you support these end of these diversions too. The board is ready to offer our Washington communities the opportunity to come twice the biennium to help fund essential infrastructure. And please add our $490,000 request from the account to the capital budget proposal going forward to create a data dashboard for the projects funded by our sync partners. That somehow didn't make it into the governor's budget. So thank you for your consideration. Go big or go home, and please support this $400 million investment in the health and safety of our Washington communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Maycutt, go ahead, please.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, go big or go home. I'm going to ask you to go smaller. Thank you, Chairman Theringer and members of the committee. My name is Chris Maycutt. I'm the director of Friends of Bumping Lake, a Washington State nonprofit organization with membership predominantly in the Yakima area. We are here today to oppose funds dedicated to the Department of Ecology under the Yakima Basin Water Supply Program and the Columbia River Water Supply Program. For over 15 years, the legislature has appropriated hundreds of millions of dollars to ecology, which has used much of that money through the Office of the Columbia River to aggressively study numerous environmentally damaging and uneconomical new water projects such as irrigation storage dams and pumping plants in the Yakima River Basin. Now, the Department of Ecology has proposed for the 2023-25 capital budget $49 million for OCR Yakima plan, and that includes a new Bumping Lake Dam, a Weimer Dam, and pumping 200,000 acre feet out of Lake Cochise. To date, there's been only one nonpartisan study of the Yakima plan, and that was ordered and funded by this Washington State legislature and conducted through the Washington State Water Research Center in Pullman. And according to their analysis, the costs for the Yakima plan far exceed the benefits. The value of the ancient forests that would be flooded by a new Bumping Lake Dam are estimated at $1.8 billion, and the estimated 100-year return for the dam at Bumping Lake is estimated at 18 cents for every dollar you spend. 18 cents.
Can you wrap up, please, Mr.
Yes,
Maycutt?
last sentence. Because of the inability for the Department of Ecology to meet legislative deadlines, we asked for a performance audit of OCR before any further funds are provided. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Olson, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, and members of the committee. I'm Michael Olson, Superintendent of the Kettle Falls School District in the 7th Legislative District. I'm speaking today regarding the funding for the Small School Modernization Grant. Kettle Falls School District is a small rural district in Stevens County. We have 750 students. Our elementary school opened in 1951 and our middle school in 57. The infrastructure of these buildings are largely unchanged from the time they opened. We have leaking water and steam pipes, considerably subpar electrical systems, no ability to provide ventilation, and with plumbing from the 50s, it's extremely difficult to meet the new lead requirements. Our elementary school is project number 15 on the list, and we're extremely thankful for the support. However, our middle school isn't even on the list yet. It took us several application cycles before we were even added to the list, and even longer to move up the list to be in a position to receive funding. Due to these delays, our project had to be reduced because of the significant increase in the cost of material and labor. The same thing is happening to every district on the list. Every year that passes without a grant, the cost of materials and labor grows. I urge you to fully fund the list of projects for Small District Modernization Grant Program. It's for our students and our futures. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you. And we'll go to our person testifier. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Connor Haggerty, Assistant Director of State Relations at Washington State University, here today signed in other. WSU built its budget request to highly prioritize the most important projects, incorporate philanthropic giving, and prioritize deferred maintenance. This is one of the best deferred maintenance budgets we've seen in a long time. Also appreciated is the funding to match philanthropic giving to a new building, a new engineering building, and funding to get us moving forward toward a new science building in Pullman. We do need to highlight a few important projects, however, that were omitted. The design for the Spokane Team Health Building will enable us to move on a sorely needed health sciences simulation center to train the next generation of doctors, nurses, and pharmacists in a team-based environment. And we badly need to begin the renovation of the Knott Dairy in Pullman, a deferred maintenance Superfund site into itself, and importantly, the provider of milk for Cougar Gold cheese. We ask that you reference WSU's request as you build your budget to help keep the university's priorities in order. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we'll go to remote testimony, and we've become a little more efficient. The vice chair didn't have to call these people up. They got notified some magical way. So we're going to start with Amanda DeShazio, if you would please testify.
Chair, while that's getting queued up, may I queue up the on deck in person,
that's a
please?
good idea.
Jeff DeLuca, Ross Quigley, and John Singh, and Dylan Plummer.
Go ahead, Ms. DeShazio.
Thank you. I'm Amanda DeShazio with the Tacoma-Pierce County Affordable Housing Consortium. We're grateful to see such a large investment into housing through the governor's budget. While we're excited to see an appropriation of over $600 million towards the Housing Trust Fund through the capital budget and referendum allocation, we ask that you consider increasing the amount in the capital budget to $400 million. There are two things we know for certain. We are in a housing crisis, and investing in affordable housing alleviates the pressures of that crisis. What we are not sure of is whether the referendum will pass. While we're hopeful, we do not want to be uncertain about the amount of funding we will have to develop much needed affordable housing. In Pierce County, we currently have 450 affordable units on hold to be developed because we don't have enough funding. Developers are working hard to make those dollars stretch. In Pierce County, we raise $7 for every $1 invested. While we do what we can, it's not enough. We ask that you go big this year and allocate $400 million into the capital budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ellefson, if you would.
Esteemed Chair, Theringer, and members, I'm Kimberly Ellefson. I'm a committed behavioral health homeless service provider. I've lived experience in homelessness. I'm currently experiencing housing insecurity. Last year, I was priced out of my housing. I am only afforded substandard conditions with no dignity. Because of my felon label, I am stuck at poverty wages. I cannot break income barriers. Even with 3 college degrees and years of experience, I have worked since I was 15 years old. I am 60 now. I have no pension. I and many like me cannot meet income requirements to rent a 1-bedroom. I cannot retire. SSA will not sustain me. I work or I die. Far too many who cannot work die. I have overcome a great deal of trauma, but the two that continue to linger are poverty and housing insecurity. Adequate, affordable housing is a human right. Our budget must reflect care for humanity and the dignity of all our citizens without exception. Instead of survival, let's deliver opportunity and means to survive. $400 million.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Jantz, go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Theringer and Member Steele and the members of the committee. My name is Steve Jantz. I'm a superintendent and principal in a small school district named Keller in Ferry County. We're on the Colville Confederate Tribe. We're part of the Sandpoil. We are a K-6 elementary, one of the small school districts in the state. We have a very small levy fund of $18,000. And due to the fact that Governor Inslee has allowed us to have this small modernization grant available, we are going to be able to put in windows, doors, HVAC, and lighting. It is incredible that a small school district like ours has that opportunity. So we want to thank the legislature, Governor Inslee, for thinking of us. But in the meantime, we also want the governor and the state to look at funding other schools that we have mentioned before. Up to about 41 schools have qualified and sent in their information. So please fund this grant program to the fullest possible level. And the grant is critical for small schools like ours. It's a big grant for a small school, and we thank you and appreciate your time and listening.
Thank you. Mr. DeLuca, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, and members of the committee. My name is Jeff DeLuca, Executive Director of the Washington State Community Action Partnership, the state association for Washington's 30 community action agencies, who are weatherization providers in 37 counties. I'm here today to kick off a panel that'll highlight a strong coalition in support of the governor's proposed investments in the Weatherization Plus Health program, which leverages the federal weatherization assistance program to lower energy costs and provide wraparound services to support healthy, safe, and accessible housing for low-income homeowners and renters. We're in a critical moment for this program as highly restricted federal dollars from the bipartisan infrastructure law are putting pressure on the program to grow alongside the ambitious goal of the state energy strategy to serve 10% of all eligible customers annually. Regardless of whether the funds come from bonds or the CCA, please ensure that the full $41 million for weatherization and $5 million for the Community Energy Efficiency Program end up in the final budget. This is a program that is uniquely positioned to meet Washington's housing, health, and energy justice needs.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair, we have, I think, some other folks here ready to go remotely, but is there anybody in the room you want to call up before we get to their testimony?
Thank you, Chair.
And we've got about 15 minutes left, and just as we may not get to everybody, but make sure you get your testimony into staff, and they'll make sure it gets to the committee members.
All right, Monica Guevara, Aaron Jazeski, Jason Gallier, excuse me, for in person on, yeah.
Great, and while they're coming up, we'll go to Mr. Quigley. Go ahead, Mr. Quigley, remotely.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I'm Ross Quigley with Opportunity Council and the Building Performance Center based in Bellingham, testifying in support of weatherization funding in the proposed budget. The homes occupied by the lowest income members of our community are generally in the worst states of disrepair of all of our housing stock. And these homes are also the most energy wasteful. For people living in poverty, if your home wastes a lot of energy, it's really expensive to heat in the winter, and you may still not be able to provide enough heat to replace the heat that's escaping and maintain a comfortable and healthy home. We work with families all the time who have to make decisions between paying for heat or paying for medications or food or other necessities. For families like these, weatherization is a step on the pathway out of poverty. We can fix the issues of unchecked heat loss and inefficient heating. Then these households don't need to watch their resources being unnecessarily depleted year after year, setting them back further year after year. But for our work to result in real substantial improvements for these families, we need the resources the state provides through Weatherization Plus Health. Please approve the governor's proposed budget.
Thank you. And we're going to go to folks in the committee room, and go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Theringer, Ranking Member Steele, and members of the committee. My name is Jason Gauthier, Executive Manager of the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners, a collaboration between Pierce County, the Puyallup Tribe of Indians, and 13 cities and towns across Pierce County, working to create and preserve affordable, attainable, and accessible housing. I'll be brief. My members have a number of capital budget requests this year to immediately begin to produce the more than 70,000 affordable housing units that the Growth Management Planning Framework under 1220 now require. So these investments would be $500,000 in the 28th Legislative District for 25 affordable housing units for very low-income households. It's the Lhasa Gravely Lake project. Another $1.95 million for an acquisition in the 27th Legislative District in Tacoma for property that will realize 220 plus affordable housing units. Another $15 million to support the first phase of 177 units of a total of 285 units to support homeless members of our community in Pierce County in the 28th Legislative District. And then finally, a unique opportunity has emerged in Pierce County. The Pierce County Housing Authority is dispossessing of 126 housing units. We'd like to see investments to ensure those units remain permanently affordable for low-income homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Chair, Committee, Hunger Champions, signed in other. I am Aaron Jazeski with Food Lifeline.
only as we see a need to prepare a capital budget for additional food banking capacity needs. I'll call your attention first to Eloise's Cooking Pot Food Bank as presented in the governor's budget, but also a community food hub project in the 34th that is forthcoming. Food banks represent the state's strategic stockpile of emergency food. It is an interconnected system of 3 large statewide food bank distribution centers, 10 medium-sized regional distribution centers, and 500 local agencies. A dynamic system that has immediate capital needs, gaps to address, and if focused well, opportunity to achieve greater system throughput. That means more Washington-grown food in more communities every single day. I'll close by saying that the legislature, state agencies, and the charitable hunger relief community worked past exhaustion in the state's pandemic hunger response. Let's honor this work by enhancing the food bank account within the capital budget.
Thank you. And Madam Vice Chair, is anyone you want to call up into the room before we go to the list of folks that are remote?
Thank you. We do have a couple of people that I did call up in person that are in the queue for remote that you'll identify next. And then in addition to that, I'd like to call up Mitch Dimming, Scott Richards, and Jasmine Zimmer-Stuckey.
Great. And so we'll go to remote testimony. Dylan Plummer, please.
Thank you, Chair Theringer, Vice Chair Callan, and members of the House Budget Committee. My name is Dylan Plummer, and I'm a campaign representative with the Sierra Club working on building decarbonization in Washington and Oregon. I'm here today to speak to the importance of supporting Governor Inslee's proposal for $41 million in the low-income home weatherization plus health program, as well as the impact that this funding continues to create across the state. Our homes are our last line of defense from the impacts of the climate crisis. Continuing to fund this program and expanding funding is critical to building resilience for vulnerable Washington residents, the impacts of climate change, including wildfire smoke and extreme heat, and to protect the pocketbooks of low and moderate income families by increasing access to high efficiency appliances and lowering utility bills. Weatherization programs are expanding access to healthy housing, high efficiency heating and cooling, and affordable energy bills for tenants and homeowners across Washington state, while providing good paying green jobs. On behalf of the tens of thousands of Sierra Club members and supporters across the state, I'm asking you to please support Governor Inslee's proposal of $41 million for the low income weatherization plus health program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Monica Guevara, please. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, members of the House Capital Budget. I'm Monica Guevara. I'm testifying today as the Economic Inclusion Manager at Emerald Cities Collaborative. We believe that investment in diverse workforce and contractor development plays a crucial role in boosting local economic development. I create programming that supports the growth of minority and women-owned contractors so they are positioned to take on more and larger clean energy projects. By prioritizing the development of diverse and skilled workforce, we can not only improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the weatherization program, but also create much needed job opportunities for members of BIPOC communities who are disproportionately impacted by unemployment and underemployment, and in doing so, promote economic equity and stimulate economic growth overall. That is why we support the governor's request for $46 million for weatherization plus health and community energy efficiency. The investment will not only help to improve the energy efficiency of homes and buildings in our state, but also create much-needed job opportunities for BIPOC communities and support the growth of small, locally owned businesses. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we'll go down to our panel that's in the chamber. Mr. Demings, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Theringer and members of the committee and Ranking Member Steele. Mitch Denning, representing WMOA, the Maintenance and Operation Administrators. We want to thank you for hearing House Bill 1147. We are signed in very pro on this. You've heard a lot of stories about the small district tribal compact grant, and also what you haven't heard about, the Healthy Kids, Healthy Schools grant that provides for grants for physical education, nutrition, T12 lighting, and lead remediation. In addition, the small school repair grant also does similar kinds of projects. WMOA sits on all 3 of these committees and makes the decisions. They hear the stories that you've heard, and please fund these 3 grants at their maximum level. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Scott Richards here on behalf of the Nature Conservancy, signed in as other. Jessica and I will be focusing on the funding level for Ecology's Floodplain by Design program, a program that helps restore rivers, protect lives, and support climate resiliency. Ecology requested $70 million in capital budget funding to support the program. However, the governor's budget funded it at $50 million. I'm testifying to request funding levels at the $70 million level. At this level, the program will fund much needed work on the Quileute River in the Olympic Peninsula. The project, led by the Quileute tribe, will restore 5 miles of stream, home to 23 distinct runs of salmon, preserving one of the last best fishing rivers outside of Alaska, but is now experiencing declining runs for steelhead and salmon. And the project will reconnect an oxbow that has been artificially disconnected, reducing flood hazard to the tribal village of La Push, protecting infrastructure valued at $31 million, and reducing the risk of flooding for at least 25 families. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Jasmine Zimmer-Stuckey with the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership, and I'm here to discuss the Department of Ecology funding request for floodplains by design of $70 million. Funding at this level would secure funding for our own project in Southwest Washington to restore the East Fork Lewis River. Using nature-based solutions, this project will reduce risks of flooding and erosion that currently threaten an active gravel mining operation, a county park, a county road maintenance facility, along with dozens of homes. This is the only floodplains by design project in Southwest Washington, but the governor's proposed funding level would not include this project. If this project were to receive floodplains by design funding, this project would be fully funded with the help of the already secured $7 million from the riparian funding the legislature passed last session, and we would be on track to break ground in 2024. Supporters of the East Fork Lewis project include county council members, a sand and gravel mining business, a fly fishing group, conservation organizations, and natural resource department staff at Cowlitz Indian Tribe. Thank you.
Thank you. And that will probably wrap up the number of folks that we'll be able to hear testimony from that are in the room, and we'll go to some folks that are remote to finish off. And just remind folks to get testimony to the committee. That same website that you used to sign up to testify is the website you can use to send information to the committee. So with that, Jason Perrins, I think, is teed up and ready to testify remotely.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Senator, and committee members.
We can just barely hear you, Mr. Perrins.
You barely hear me, okay.
Better.
Is that better? No. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's still broken up, but we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Jason Perrins, the superintendent of Cheweah School District in the 7th Legislative District. We're a small rural school district of 770 students. I'm speaking pro for the Small Modernization Grant program. The Cheweah School District is considered a low-income community by all standards. We run bonds in our community that are very difficult. We've tried with little success. Our schools are over 40 years old and need attention, and specifically in the next 3 to 5 years. Nevertheless, our community has stepped up and on many occasions supports capital levies, which have been a great strength and benefit to us. Capital levies, however, they allow us to upgrade and maintain our facilities, whether it's sidewalks or lighting or maintenance projects. So these small modernization grants have been wonderful for us. We've received one of $3.5 million, and we continue to apply for them in the future to help us. So I appreciate the support. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chad Vauclin, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For clarity, I've signed in pro of HB 1149, speaking on HB 1147, signed in as other. My name is Chad Vauclin with the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle and King County Membership Association with over 200 members that represent all facets of the affordable housing sector. And I'd like to thank you for going big and bold for housing this year, as as the housing crisis needs to be met with the urgency and the scale that is warranted. And while we're thrilled with the proposed bold vision to bring more affordable homes to the communities, we want to make sure that funding for something as important as the Housing Trust Fund is not accompanied with additional hurdles and uncertainties. Currently, there's an estimation of a nearly 160,000 unit shortage of affordable homes in King County. And the Housing Trust Fund is the state's best tool for ensuring access to safe, healthy, and affordable housing, and fully funding it with an investment of $400 million is essential. Through the capital budget, you have the ability to ensure that we invest $400 million in producing affordable homes that so many Washingtonians desperately need. So please fully fund the Housing Trust Fund, and thank you for your time and for considering this request.
Thank you. And the last person that will be able to testify today is Jude Amen. And Jude, if you could, thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Theringer and members of the Capital Budget Committee. My name is Jude Ahmed, and I am the advocacy organizer testifying other on House Bill 1147 on behalf of the Tacoma Urban League and the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. We serve Black and other vulnerable communities in providing housing and direct assistance for over 90 years. I implore this committee to address the immediate need for Washington State to meet our massive housing production goals. And whereas Governor Inslee utilizes a referendum to fund the Housing Trust Fund, please do not wait until voters decide in a November referendum whether to take this step. Instead, please fund $400 million in the Housing Trust Fund using general fund dollars. In addition, these dollars must go towards prioritizing programs by and for Black, Indigenous, and communities of color. One way you can meet this ask is to follow the governor's lead in funding $75 million for home ownership, with at least 50% of that going towards programs like the Black Homes Initiative. This is an effort spearheaded by leaders such as our CEO, Michelle Merriweather, with the necessary experience to take swift action to address racial disproportionality in home ownership. This is an opportunity to use action rather than just words to support Black community members. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, that will end the public hearing on HB 1147, HB 1148, and HB 1149. Thanks everyone who testified. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for orchestrating the testimony. And for new members, I got a little sense of what the issues are statewide on some of the issues that the capital budget will be looking at. So thanks for your patience. With that, we are adjourned.